A, the defendant is placed in a position to plead to 10 different violent felonies flowing really from one act. That was the breaking into the facility. The point here being that someone who has committed a crime pays his debts to society, then 18 years later gets caught with a gun in his home, not committing any crime, not being violent per se, and now prosecutors want to treat him as a violent felon and use his previous pleas to toss him in jail for a mandatory 15 years. All very, very harsh. And that approach can, in fact, ruin lives. And that's the type of thing that needs to be looked at. All right, let me bring in my guest. Joining me again is former federal prosecutor and former Department of Justice senior attorney Tammy Allison. Tammy, you specialize in pardon, so let's address that first, the idea that they want to posthumously pardon George Floyd from a case that it's been shown the cop who was on the case had informants lie. That essentially that's what led to the prosecution. He did it in a number of cases, and they've looked at a number of his cases. So actually it's a good call by the Department of Parole and Probation. What do you think?
So, Michael, there's a lot to unpack here. And yes, I am an expert in federal executive clemency. I spent the first half of a decade at the United States Department of Justice's Office of the Pardon Attorney, making presidential pardon recommendations under Presidents Bush, Obama, and Trump. When I launched my law practice, the Pardon Attorney, in November 2020, that's how you all got to meet me, because I've been talking about clemency through ownership and the fact that underrepresented groups, specifically Black people, are 4 times less likely to receive presidential pardons than their white counterparts. So with this recommendation, right here in Texas, where I am, in Texas, the Texas Board of Pardons and Parole has favorably recommended the pardon for George Floyd. And I want the viewers to understand that whenever we use that word, it means that George Floyd has passed. So even though he is no longer alive, he can still be recommended favorably for a pardon, which would restore his rights back. Because when an individual has a conviction, whether on the state or the federal level, their state and federal constitutional rights, they're gone. The right to possess a firearm, the right to vote, the right to sit on a jury, the right to hold public office. So it would be amazing for him to actually be granted by the governor, because that is the step. The board makes the favorable recommendation in Texas after a vote, and then the governor, Governor Abbott, would have to make the decision as to whether he is going to grant or deny that recommendation by the board. From my understanding, the underlying offense conduct occurred in 2004 in Houston, Texas, where Mr. Floyd pled guilty to a drug charge. And the individual who he had allegedly sold the drugs to got caught up years later and was found to have lied and falsified a lot of evidence. Those are the type of things that I try to look at whenever I'm actually assisting someone with their petitions for clemency, because even though George Floyd, back in 2004 when this happened, he accepted responsibility by that guilty plea, it does not negate the fact that there is still bias and things have changed. What we're looking at is, if he had that arrest and conviction today, would it still stand? Probably not, because that undercover officer has been shown to have lied and falsified evidence. So that's what's important. Yes, there is change that is needed in the criminal justice system, but I do take issue with Benjamin Crump's statement, because it does not clearly define what clemency is and what the difference between a pardon and a commutation is. So me being an expert in that field, I think it's very important for attorneys to stick to your lane and tap in with the expert, so that we're not that we're not perpetuating misconceptions, because there are still incarcerated individuals and individuals that are formerly incarcerated that are listening to this. And when they hear it and don't have a clear understanding, it can lead to a lot of disappointment, a lot of hurt, and a lot of confusion.
Fair enough. Very important points, and I appreciate you pointing them out. And you talk about Ben Crump staying in his lane, and I think he did stay in his lane, Tammy. That might be the problem. The idea for him is that what he wanted folks to focus on is the reform in the system in general, and the fact that when you do this type of thing to a young man, back in 2004, George Floyd was still a young man, This is the type of thing that can cause someone's life to spiral out of control. People have to understand that when you send someone back into society as a convicted felon, it really changes their life. It cuts them off, it boxes them in, gives them options, or begin to be cut off in different ways. And I think that's what he wants folks to focus on.
And, you know, that's exactly why I took that huge risk and quit the Department of Justice after 12 years to launch this firm dedicated solely to clemency, which is the correct terminology, federal executive clemency. And under clemency, there's two different types, a pardon and a commutation. So while he may have tried to stay in his lane, no. The thing is that in this specific situation, there was a guilty plea. So we can't talk about, you know, how, you know, that, you know, things are so bad and things are unjust because there was a guilty plea. The point here is that the officer that was involved in that conviction related to Mr. Floyd subsequently got caught up with some lying and falsifying documents. That right there shows that had Mr. Floyd had the arrest and conviction today, it would be different. And he may not have even had that conviction. There are a lot of individuals that are facing similar situations on the state and the federal level. And it is very important to be very specific and clear with the words that we choose to use, because yes, there is inherent bias in the criminal justice system, but clemency is forgiveness. That is what it means in its purest form. It's forgiveness. It's acceptance of responsibility and showing that someone has atoned for their offense conduct and they're worthy of the forgiveness that clemency brings that could result in them getting their rights back. Yes, there does need to be legislative changes, but until there's legislative changes on the state and federal level, we have to be very clear so that individuals that do not have resources, do not have affiliations with politicians and celebrities, they understand that they are also deserving of clemency.
All right, appreciate you, Tammy, totally. And, you know, it is never too late to clear a man's name at the end of the day, and hopefully this will work out for the Floyd family. All right, stand by, Tammy. When we return, we're going to take a break. When we return, we have our daily talkback segment. You don't want to miss that. It's Michael Ayala here on Court TV Live. Keep it right here, your front row seat to justice.
Tonight, my closing arguments, the reality star kidnapping trial gets underway and our cameras are inside the courtroom. We'll look at which side had the most compelling opening statement and what's next in the case. And on the docket, the killing of Ahmaud Arbery murder trial is set